"The problem, Leonard," Greg said, leaning back in his leather chair, "is that your window's 95 inches. A cloud world." The room broke into laughter, the kind that sounds polite on the surface but has a jagged edge underneath. My name is Leonard Haynes, 58 years old. Senior Operations Trainer at Turner Logistics Incorporated. 30 years with the company. 30 years spent turning fresh hires into functioning professionals, fixing systems no one else understood, and keeping this place running while Greg Turner climbed his way into the big chair. Now, apparently, I was the punchline of his PowerPoint. I stared at the cup of coffee cooling in front of me, the ring it left on the polished oak conference table spreading like a stain. The projector hummed, flickering through Greg's slides about modernizing our workforce. His daughter, Emily, sat beside him, nodding like one of those plastic bobbleheads. 26. MBA from somewhere expensive. A resume thinner than a sticky note, but wrapped in a surname that carried weight. Greg clicked the remote, and that's why, starting next quarter, Emily will be spearheading our modernization initiative. He looked at me, his grin pretending to be fatherly. "She'll shadow you for a few weeks, get the lay of the land, and then take over training and development. You can help her with the transition." The word transition hung in the air like smoke. Someone at the table coughed to hide another laugh. My stomach tightened, but my face didn't move. 30 years in corporate combat teaches you that showing emotion is like bleeding in shark water. I just nodded once. "Of course," I said. My voice came out smooth, level. The same tone I used to calm new hires when they panicked during system crashes. "Happy to help." Greg's relief was instant. He hated confrontation almost as much as he loved golf metaphors. "That's the spirit. We all have to adapt, right? Out with the floppy disks. In with the cloud." He chuckled at his own joke, tapping the table with the remote like it was a gavel. I wanted to tell him that the only reason the company hadn't collapsed under his leadership was because people like me still remembered where all the old cables were buried. Instead, I smiled and scribbled a note in my planner. "Emily. Start date. Monday." After the meeting, people filtered out with that awkward half-sympathy you see at funerals. Pat on the shoulder, muttered compliments, no eye contact. Emily lingered, adjusting the strap of her designer handbag. "I'm really excited to learn from you, Leonard," she said, voice bright and confident. "Dad says you're like a walking manual." "A manual," I repeated. "That's one way to put it." She didn't notice the tone. "I'll need access to the training archives, and maybe you can give me a crash course on the old logistics software. I've never used something that... Vintage. Like I was a collectible." "Sure thing," I said. "I'll get everything ready." When she left, I sat alone in the conference room, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The air smelled faintly of coffee and toner. On the wall behind Greg's chair hung a framed motto: "Innovation through integrity." I'd designed that slogan 15 years ago for the company's rebrand. Now it felt like a cruel joke. I opened my laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard, but I didn't type. Instead, I listened to the hum of the air conditioner, the faint chatter of salespeople outside, the rhythmic tap of Greg's cheap metal watch as he passed by the hallway. Every sound etched itself into memory. I'd given this company everything: missed birthdays, long nights, weekends lost to system rollouts. I'd watched Greg hire and fire, promote and discard. I'd taught 3 generations of employees how to keep the gears turning. Now, after 3 decades, I was a relic in my own museum. Still, I smiled when I passed him in the corridor. "Congratulations again on the modernization plan," I said. "Appreciate that, Lenny," he replied, clapping my shoulder. "Don't worry. We'll find something useful for you once Emily gets up to speed. Something useful." That night, at home, I placed my company ID badge on the kitchen table and stared at it for a long time. The plastic was scratched, the logo faded. 30 years of fingerprints rubbed into the surface. My wife, Claire, walked in, saw my face, and stopped. "Rough day? Just a reboot," I said quietly. I went to my study and opened a drawer full of old training binders, records, reports, everything that made Turner Logistics run. Each page was a memory, a map of how the machine really worked. They thought they could delete me with a line of corporate humor. 30 years of loyalty, deleted with one sentence. But what they didn't know was I never really hit uninstall. Emily arrived on a Monday morning, heels clicking down the hallway like a countdown. She carried a tablet tucked under her arm and a confidence that didn't match the look in her eyes, the one people get when they're pretending not to be afraid. I stood by her new desk, the one that used to be mine, before Greg decided the corner office was better optics for a leadership transition. She smiled, like she was already in charge. "Morning, Leonard. Ready to show me the ropes? Dad says you know everything about the old systems." The old systems. That's what she called 30 years of infrastructure. I nodded. "Sure thing. I'll start you on the logistics database. It's the heart of operations." She frowned, tapping her screen. Right. The legacy platform. Honestly, I'm thinking we'll sunset that soon. Maybe move to something more agile. Agile. The word landed like static. She used it 5 more times before lunch. By the end of the first week, she'd replaced every working process with color-coded spreadsheets and something called an efficiency board. She sent out emails about innovation pipelines and cross-platform synergy. I didn't argue. I'd learned a long time ago that people who use too many buzzwords don't listen to anything that doesn't sound like one. When the first client delivery fell apart, an order misrouted because she'd deleted a redundant column from a tracking file, she blamed the software. "This system's prehistoric," she said in front of Greg. "I mean, no offense, Leonard, but it's basically stone tablets." Greg laughed like it was charming. "That's why she's here, Len. Fresh eyes. Don't take it personally." I didn't. I just went back to my desk and opened a new folder on my drive titled Divided by Documentation. Inside it, I created subfolders. Meetings. Errors. Revisions. Approvals. Every email, every version number, every timestamp went in. Not out of malice, at least not yet. Out of habit. Out of self-preservation. By month's end, she was managing 6 projects and delivering none. She'd start meetings with motivational quotes from LinkedIn and end them by asking me to circle back later with the actual numbers. I wrote her status reports, formatted her presentations, and cleaned up her spreadsheets when formulas broke. She called it team collaboration. One afternoon, she slid her chair next to mine and whispered, "Can you fix this for me real quick? The pivot tables aren't pivoting." I looked at the screen. She'd erased half the data. "You deleted the reference links," I said. "Oh," she said, shrugging. "You're faster at this stuff anyway." She smiled, like it was a compliment. I fixed it. I always fixed it. Then I saved a copy under Divided by Documentation, Divided by Emily, Presentation, Q3. Greg stopped by later that day, arms folded, pretending to be casual. "Leonard, I've been getting some feedback. Emily says you're not being as proactive in helping her adapt." "Proactive?" I repeated. "She's under pressure, son. Don't leave her hanging. All right? You've got decades of experience. Share it." "I already do," I said. But he was halfway down the hall. The next week, she sent an all-staff email with a subject line, "New Workflow Protocols," by Emily Turner. Attached was my 12-page training manual, copied word for word except for a new header with her name. The email ended with, "Special thanks to Leonard for his support in the transition." Support. That word again. I didn't respond. I just opened Divided by Documentation, Divided by Email, Correspondence. Another entry. Another bullet in the magazine. By the time the quarterly review came, she was talking about restructuring the department. She'd ordered branded coffee mugs for the team that said, "ET, empowering tomorrow." People laughed, the nervous kind of laugh that means they're waiting to see who gets fired first. The board meeting was on a Thursday. I was asked to sit in the back, just in case technical questions came up. Greg introduced her like she was royalty. Emily walked to the podium, hair tied back, heels sharp against the tile. On the screen behind her glowed the title slide. Operational Efficiency Report. Prepared by Emily Turner. My report. My charts. My data. I watched her present every metric, every improvement, every solution I'd designed to fix the mess she'd made. She smiled, gesturing at the screen, as if she'd written the code herself. The board applauded. Greg beamed. I didn't clap. I just watched the system corrupt itself, line by line, in real time. Every bad program crashes eventually. The office felt different at night. Quieter, colder. The hum of the air vents echoed through empty hallways, like a mechanical heartbeat. I started staying late under the excuse of cleaning up old files, something no one questioned, because no one wanted to do it. After 30 years, people stopped asking why you were still there. You were part of the furniture, invisible unless something broke. That's how I liked it. Greg had gone home hours ago, his jacket slung over one arm, and his favorite phrase tossed over his shoulder. Don't work too hard, Lenny. Emily had left earlier, perfume still lingering near her desk, a faint trace of expensive confidence. She'd spent the afternoon editing another presentation, padding numbers I recognized from last quarter. She didn't even bother to change the order of the data columns. Her growth metrics were mine, recycled and inflated. Greg signed off without reading. He never did. I sat at my workstation, the glow of the monitor lighting my hands. The file tree unfolded like a map of lies. Project reports, budget summaries, approvals. I opened one folder after another, tracing edits, timestamps, IP addresses. Every document told a story of manipulation. Emily shifting decimals, moving deadlines, copying paragraphs from my templates. Greg's digital signature appeared at the bottom of each one. Authorization, without comprehension. I began collecting, not deleting, not altering, just saving. A new directory on a private drive, labeled Divided by Verification. Every file got a duplicate, renamed with precise timestamps. I embedded a checksum verification to prove integrity. No tampering, no tricks. Facts, preserved in amber. By midnight, the office lights dimmed automatically, but I didn't notice. My mind was a machine now, running lines of logic. Every click of the mouse another entry, every backup another nail. I didn't feel anger. Anger was messy. What I felt was calculation, clean and cold. Emily's emails were gold mines. She bragged in corporate slang that almost sounded innocent. Streamlining existing data to reflect anticipated growth. Translation, lying to investors. Her weekly updates painted Turner Logistics as a thriving innovator. In reality, 2 contracts were bleeding money, and another had been quietly terminated months ago. The company was a balloon pumped full of optimism and fraud. I documented everything. Screenshots, metadata, message headers. No assumptions, only proof. I cataloged the chain of approvals, Greg's initials on every falsified document. He'd built his legacy on trust, and Emily was using it as insulation. She failed upward. I cleaned the mess. At 2 in the morning, I connected an external drive. It hummed softly, copying gigabytes of evidence. I encrypted the archive under a passphrase only I could remember. Then, a second backup to a cloud account, under an alias I'd created years ago for testing. Old habits. Safe habits. Before shutting down, I set an automation inside the company servers. Not malicious, just procedural. A script that would, when triggered, send the archive to specific recipients: the audit board, the legal department, and Turner's biggest client. The trigger was simple: Emily uploading one more falsified report under my credentials. She'd done it twice already. A third time, and the truth would deliver itself. At home, the house was dark except for the kitchen light. Claire was still awake, her book open but unread. She looked up when I walked in. "You've been staying late a lot," she said softly. "Lots to clean up," I replied, hanging my coat. She studied my face. "You okay, Mike?" I poured myself a glass of water, the reflection of the overhead light slicing across the counter. "Just running updates," I said. She smiled, thinking it was a joke, and went back to her book. In bed, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept listing files in silence, folders nested inside folders, order built from chaos. Greg and Emily thought I was harmless, a relic too slow to fight back. They forgot relics are often built to last. The next morning, I arrived before sunrise. The office smelled of disinfectant and paper dust. I powered up my computer, the login screen blinking patiently. One last test. I composed an email, attached a dummy report, and typed the subject line: "Crash Report, Turner Systems." Then I hit send and watched the icon spin until it disappeared. The system was live now. Everything else was just waiting for the right command. The morning it happened, the office smelled like burnt coffee and panic. Emily was pacing near the glass wall of the conference room, her tablet clutched in one hand and a phone in the other. Her voice carried through the glass, sharp and brittle. "No, I didn't authorize that shipment delay. The system must have glitched again. We're fixing it." The client's name was Daxon Freight, a contract worth $3 million, the biggest we'd landed all year. I'd warned her about overpromising delivery times 2 weeks ago. She'd smiled and told me, "We'll adapt." Now, the deal was gone. I watched from my desk as she hung up and turned to Greg. His face had that strained pink flush that came right before he exploded. He stormed out of the conference room, the door swinging wide behind him. "Everyone, in the bullpen, now." His voice cracked like a whip. People froze mid-typing. Chairs squeaked. I stood, slow and steady, while the others gathered. Greg's jaw was tight, his tie crooked, the kind of detail he usually cared about. "We just lost Daxon Freight," he said. The silence afterward felt heavy, like the whole building exhaled and waited. You know why? Because someone can't keep up with basic modern processes. His eyes landed on me. Someone who refuses to evolve. I didn't move. He pointed a finger. "Leonard, you've been sitting on those outdated systems for years. You trained her on bad data. You sabotaged her ability to succeed." That word "sabotaged" rolled around the room like a grenade with the pin half pulled. Emily didn't say anything. She stood behind him, eyes wide, guilt disguised as confusion. Greg stepped closer until his breath smelled like bitter espresso and rage. "You're obsolete," he said. "I don't have time to babysit nostalgia. Pack your things. You're done here." I looked at him for a long moment. 30 years of service compressed into that single command. Then I nodded once. No protest, no plea, just compliance. I turned, walked to my cubicle, and opened the top drawer. One box, one mug, one USB drive. That was all I took. The mug had a crack along the handle. The drive held everything that mattered. Greg's voice followed me as I walked toward the exit. "You should have retired when floppy disks did." The laughter from a few desks was nervous, misplaced. The kind of sound people make when they're afraid they'll be next. Outside, the sunlight hit the glass facade, and for the first time in months, I saw my reflection without the company behind it. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove to the end of the parking lot. From there, I could see the top floors of Turner Logistics reflected in the mirrored building across the street. It looked stable from the outside. Clean lines, Blue tint, quiet hum. A system unaware that a crash sequence had already begun. That night, the automation triggered at exactly 9:03 p.m. Every falsified report Emily had ever submitted, every doctored spreadsheet, every forged digital signature, forwarded simultaneously to the company's legal department, the board of directors, and the external auditors. Each file came with metadata, timestamps, and access logs showing her credentials. Greg's sign-offs were stamped on every page like fingerprints at a crime scene. In my inbox, a copy of the system log arrived, confirmation that the process executed flawlessly. Then, the corporate network erupted. Dozens of automated notifications pinged through the system. Discrepancy in financial logs. Unauthorized signature detected. Data integrity alert. I parked across the street from the office, headlights off, watching through the glass walls as the first lights flickered on. One executive appeared, then another. Phones pressed to their ears, voices raised. Within 15 minutes, half the leadership team was back in the building. Some systems fail silently. This one screamed. Emails cascaded through their servers like a flood, each one carrying truth they'd buried under metrics and smiles. I imagined Greg staring at his monitor, that pink flush creeping back up his neck as realization took hold. Emily would deny it, of course. She'd call it a misunderstanding, a technical glitch, but the data didn't lie. The sprinkler system sensors misread the sudden heat from the server racks as a fire. Alarms blared through the glass. Red strobes flashed against the dark sky. Employees ran outside in confusion, clutching their phones, shouting into the night. I sat behind the wheel, calm, watching the company implode in real time. Every system crashes differently. Some go quietly. Some take everything with them. I shifted into drive, the sound of sirens rising behind me. Not police. Not yet just chaos catching up to truth. Then, I pulled away. Headlights cutting through the smoke of something that would never rebuild the same way again. A week after I walked out of Turner Logistics, the headlines hit. SEC launches investigation into Turner Logistics accounting irregularities. The words looked almost clinical, but I could imagine the chaos behind them. Greg sweating through his suit, Emily calling lawyers, HR pretending they had no idea what was happening. The story spread fast. Local business journals picked it up first, then national outlets. By Friday, every employee's inbox overflowed with internal updates about cooperation and transparency, the kind of language companies use when they're circling the drain. I watched it all unfold from my kitchen table. Claire poured coffee and set a newspaper in front of me, her eyebrows lifting when she saw the front page. "You see this?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, folding the gents, a paper before she could read further. Old habits finally caught up. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "You always said bad data can't hide forever." I smiled faintly. It never does. Greg was forced to resign 3 days later. The board called it a strategic leadership transition. But the leaked memo told the truth: gross mismanagement, oversight failures, and negligence. Emily's name followed his in the next article. She was barred from corporate practice pending investigation for fraudulent reporting. Photos surfaced of her leaving the building with her designer handbag pressed to her chest like it was armor. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Turner Logistics' valuation collapsed overnight. Clients withdrew. Investors panicked. By the next Monday, the building I'd spent half my life in was a tomb. Empty parking lot, lights off, blinds drawn. A for-lease sign hung crooked in the front window. 30 years of structure dismantled in 7 days. That morning, I received a letter, cream envelope, embossed logo of the auditing firm. I opened it slowly. "Mr. Haynes, your prior diligence and documentation were instrumental in preserving the integrity of this investigation. Thank you for your professionalism and attention to detail. Without your data archives, The discrepancies may never have been uncovered. At the bottom was a handwritten note. "You did the right thing." I read it twice, folded it neatly, and slid it into a drawer. I didn't need their gratitude. I hadn't done it for applause. I'd done it because truth, like any good system, demands maintenance. Leave it unchecked long enough, and it corrupts everything it touches. That afternoon, I drove back to the old office. The parking lot was quiet. The asphalt cracked under the desert Sunday. I parked in my usual spot, the faded white lines still marking where I'd parked every day for 3 decades. Through the glass, I could see empty cubicles and unplugged monitors. The silence was heavier than I expected. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air smelled of dust and stale carpet cleaner. I walked past the break room, past the conference table where Greg had called me obsolete, past the spot where Emily used to rehearse her buzzword speeches. Each echo of my footsteps sounded like a memory collapsing. My old cubicle was still there. Someone had stripped it of everything except the monitor and keyboard. I set my mug back down, where it used to sit right by the corner, handle turned inward. The mug was chipped along the rim, a small imperfection that somehow made it mine. For a moment, I just stood there, letting the quiet wash over me. Sometimes, you don't burn the system, you just let it crash. I booted up the computer. The startup chime sounded hollow in the empty room. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long time before typing the final command. The encrypted archives still lived in a private folder, untouched since the night I'd built them. One keystroke would erase them all, every log, every backup, every trace. I pressed enter. The monitor flickered once, twice, then went black. The hum of the hard drive faded to silence. I ejected the USB from my pocket, the same one I'd carried out on my last day, and slipped it into the waste bin. The world outside the window was bright and quiet. "System clean," I whispered. I turned off the lights, closed the door behind me, and walked away without looking back.